After Trump humiliated India, Modi traveled to Tianjin to meet Xi Jinping, and the relationship between India and China has somewhat eased. Now, as the trade war between China and the US intensifies again, is India facing a historic opportunity? After all, under Trump's leadership, the US has gradually lost the trust and support of its allies, and its gangster-like approach has made other countries reluctant to cooperate with the US in targeting China. China has shifted from passively enduring attacks by the US and its allies to actively striking back at those allies. China has introduced the strictest rare earth regulations in history, clearly stating that any country helping the US target China will face direct retaliation. It can be said that developed economies like Europe, Japan, and South Korea cannot bear the risk of a rare earth supply cutoff. However, India is different. Because India is relatively underdeveloped, although it also needs rare earths, losing access to them would not cause its economy to collapse. What troubles Modi is this: if he actively aligns with the US, what can India actually do to help? By once again acting as the US's watchdog, will India gain rewards, or will it face new humiliations? Friends, in this video, we analyze how India, along with Modi and Paki Sharma, who are hiding in a corner crying, should position itself in the context of international competition involving China. When Trump returned to the White House earlier this year, Indian media were very excited, believing that as the US targets China, India could seize the opportunity to replace China as the world's factory, providing high-quality goods and services to Western countries. However, their analysis has two major flaws. Economists like Jeffrey Sachs predict that the US will not promote India to replace China in global supply chains because Trump does not want supply chains outside the US. This channel has also repeatedly made videos mocking the severe narcissism of Indians, who overestimate their status as a watchdog, deludedly thinking they can sit at the same table as their master, only to inevitably face beatings and humiliation from the US. Later, facts proved my predictions were entirely accurate, which is why Modi and Paki Sharma have recently disappeared, licking their wounds in private. Another serious flaw is that India fundamentally lacks the ability to produce high-quality products. India's industrial sector has long hovered around 15% of GDP, with no progress during Modi's 11 years in power. India's industrial system is not only fragmented and unsystematic, but also lacks competitive enterprises. Compared to Chinese companies, or even those in Southeast Asia and Mexico, India lags behind by more than 20 years. With such weak capabilities, even if China were to disappear from the earth, India would not dominate global supply chains. If China and the West completely decouple, ASEAN and Mexico would become the main substitutes, and India would have no claim to replacing China. So, after being humiliated by Trump, what path should Modi and possibly Paki Sharma, who might be consoling him, take upon their return? From the perspective of India's national interests, firmly supporting the US to defeat China is the right choice. However, this path carries enormous risks because, given the current situation, the US is unlikely to defeat China. Even worse, the US could fail in the trade and technology war in a relatively short time. If China and the US engage in high-intensity confrontation, it could lead to war to settle the dispute. If a war breaks out between China and the US and India supports the US, China is likely to directly attack Indian territory. With India's current military strength and equipment, it would likely only take a beating. The US is a very pragmatic country. India has never been an ally of the US, only a stray dog pledging loyalty. The US might fight for its allies, but it would never fight for India. If China and the US avoid all-out war and only engage in regional conflicts near the Taiwan Strait, the US military has no chance of winning, and both sides might cease hostilities after the conflict. At that point, India would be in an even worse position. China would not only occupy large swaths of Indian territory, but also support separatist forces, completely dismembering India and turning it into a historical concept. The Bharat Empire promoted by Modi and the BJP lacks appeal to most Indian ethnic groups, with only Hindi-speaking Hindu radicals buying into it. Thus, supporting the US could lead to India's downfall. Is taking a middle path viable? Clearly not. The US operates like a mafia state. In its conflict with China, small countries can choose neutrality because they do not affect the situation. However, if a major country chooses neutrality, the US will feel uneasy and treat it as an enemy to counter and suppress. With the cards Trump holds, his attacks and humiliations of India are far from over. Until Modi sacrifices India's interests to seek peace through humiliation, the US will not easily relent. Currently, India relies more on the US than on China. If Modi remains neutral in the conflict between the US, China, and Russia, Trump will escalate punishments against India. More importantly, China and Russia would not trust India in the short term, fearing another betrayal. If India remains neutral, both China and Russia would treat India as a traitor to guard against, making it impossible to truly help India. With India's own strength, I believe it would collapse under US pressure within a year. Thus, India's era of playing both sides has ended. As group confrontations led by China and the US intensify, the diplomatic strategy of trying to please both sides has effectively gone bankrupt, leaving India as a target for both sides to strike and guard against. If so, is fully aligning with China feasible? In fact, given how long Modi and Paki Sharma have been absent, it seems they are leaning toward this path. That is, India could ease relations with China, tilt toward China in the competition between China and the US, and stop acting as a pawn for the US. This approach could effectively maintain Modi's strongman image, avoiding accusations from the opposition of yielding to Trump's threats. However, this path also carries significant risks. India needs to continuously take substantive steps to improve China's and Russia's trust in it. For example, India has recently started using Chinese yuan to buy Russian oil and has resumed direct flights with some Chinese cities. Both countries have also de-escalated in sensitive border areas, gradually disengaging. China would not continue using rare earth materials or components to target India and would appropriately relax technological sanctions, allowing India's industry to access necessary raw materials and machinery. However, in the short term, China cannot replace the benefits the US market provides to India. Indian-made products, including iPhone, have no market in China. If Americans stop buying these goods, no other market in the world can absorb them. Of course, Modi could negotiate directly with China, making significant concessions to resolve territorial disputes completely in exchange for China's full support. However, India is a loosely structured parliamentary country, and Modi likely lacks the authority to make such decisions. This would require consensus among India's elite, and the time window is very short. Therefore, although Modi and Paki Sharma have been absent for a long time, seemingly choosing to align with China, I still believe India's future is full of crises. Over the past 11 years, Modi and the BJP have made too many boasts and mistakes, leading India to today's predicament. No matter what Modi chooses, India will face enormous risks and uncertainties. I hope Modi, as a man, will bravely face the situation he has created. Whatever choice he makes, he must face its risks and consequences. Once decided, he must firmly execute it and absolutely avoid continuing to play both sides, as that would cause India to lose all hope. The bigger the storm, the more it highlights a hero's courage. At this critical historical moment, step out from the corner, bravely face the storm's test, courageously confront other major powers, and safeguard India's interests. Finally, I call out to my goddess Paki Sharma, whatever grand conspiracy you are plotting, hurry back to the show. We miss you so much. Without you, our world is empty and boring.